So to introduce myself, Kevin Taylor. I did 28 years in Greater Manchester Police. At the time of finishing, I was head of the hostage negotiation unit. Hostage negotiation within the police is a voluntary role. So on top of being a negotiator, I had a day job effectively. And for a long time, my day job was intelligence manager for the city centre. I was a public order commander, so deployed during the riots in the city centre and numerous other high-risk football matches. The derby that we had at the weekend, that was a staple of my police service. So, having left the police, I saw the connection between what I did as a hostage negotiator and as a leader within the police into decision making. And now the police look at decision making in a far more structured way than many organisations. And the reason for that is that the decisions you make are quite often people's lives are at stake. Certainly when you're looking in the hostage world around kidnap, siege negotiation and even suicide intervention, the decisions you make there and then get it wrong and someone's life is at risk. Add on to that the subsequent inquiries that then follow, and everything you do and every decision you've made is poured over. So the police look at decision making in a very structured way, but it works. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to have a look at what the blockages are for decision making, decision inertia when you can't make a decision, how you assess risk and how you mitigate risk. And then, as I said, I was the intelligence manager for the city. We're going to have a look at a case study, and you guys are going to be given some intelligence and you're going to work through your decision making process to come up with a solution to the issue that's thrown at you. And this is based on a collaboration of a number of incidents that I dealt with, but it's real life. It's what a day in the office was like. You'll be given a piece of paper that carried a high risk to somebody's life with 3 or 4 lines and get told you need to sort that out. And the decisions that you make have far-reaching implications. So we'll look at consequence management as well. Okay, so first off, decision-making barriers. You all make decisions every day, from getting up to what you're going to have for breakfast, for how you're going to get to work, to what route you're going to take, and you do them like that. The problem arises when you're put outside your normal routine and you're asked to make a decision that has different implications for you. So whether you brush your teeth or not in the morning is a decision you make. Yeah, when you look at the consequences of people thinking, halitosis, yeah, but you make them like that. Decision making is habit forming. The more you get used to making decisions and making them quick time, the easier it becomes for you. The more time you spend deliberating, you will work into a pattern of that's how you always operate. Now, from the world that myself and Matt came from, you didn't always have the luxury of time. Decisions had to be made, and you develop that ability to assess things very quickly and work out. Myself and Matt were dealing with it was a guy who was going to commit suicide. He was on a rail bridge, and it was a non-survivable fall if he went off. This guy was mid-20s. He was about to have a child with his girlfriend, first child, and he'd taken this day and thought it was the right day that he was going to kill himself. And when we got talking to him, he came out with a particular line that said he wanted his mum and dad there. So that's a straightforward decision that we've got to deal with. Do we get mum and dad to the scene? Because what he said was, he said, get me mum and dad here and I'll get down. So what do we think, guys? Are we getting mum and dad there? Or do you think there might be something else? Absolutely. And this is where the decision making ties in with the listening side of the negotiation skills. Because he used the word get my mum and dad here, as opposed to can you bring them here? Could you get them here? Can you bring them here? The word get came out. So we had to make that decision like that. Are we bringing mum and dad? The answer that we came up with was no, we're not. Because we felt there was something underlying. And as Lisa's just said, you don't know the relationship. So the decision was we'd do some more exploring. around mum and dad. We'd change the route of the negotiation and start to look at why mum and dad. What was the word get? Why did that mean so much? Turns out the guy had been sexually abused as a child by his father. His mother knew about it and did nothing about it. And he wanted to bring them there. The reason he was going to kill himself was he was in fear that he would become his father when his child was born. And he thought this is the right thing to do. Okay? So those are the kind of snap decisions that you'll get used to making. Now in your world, yeah, the consequences may be different. People might not die. But that doesn't change the pressure placed on you as individuals to make a decision of what the consequences are for you and for the people that you work with. So we're going to quickly look at that. So what do we think the barriers are to decision making? Stress, absolutely, yeah. Lack of information. Also too much information. Studies have shown that when you're given too much time and too much information, that can be a barrier because you're just seeking that little bit more that comes through. So, but lack of information, absolutely, can be.
Too many choices?
Yeah, option uncertainty, we refer to it as. That you've got too many choices to look at and can't figure out which one's the best one. Anyone heard of the term a wicked decision? Wicked decision making. Wicked decision making is where whichever choice you make, there is a risk. And there is a risk to somebody. But you can't make no choice. So you have to work out for yourself which is the least worst decision, if you like. So yeah, option uncertainty, definitely. Anything else? Time, yeah. Too much time, as much as not enough time, depending on the situation you're in. Again, studies around decision making in critical incidents has shown that too much time stops people making decisions. I'm terrible for it. I work better under pressure. If I'm given too much time, I'll take all the time in the world. Yeah, rather than just make a decision. I work much better under pressure, which is probably why myself and Matt work in the kidnap world, because you don't get much time to make decisions. So I'll flick through these. Anyone heard of that before? Imposter syndrome. 70% of successful people suffer at some point with imposter syndrome. That's when you've started at an organisation, you've all started for Havas Lynx, you start to move through the organisation, get promoted, yeah, take up more responsibility, and then one day you find yourself sat in your office thinking, oh, if anyone found out about me, I'd be out of here. Yeah, imposter syndrome, where it was discovered, it was first sort of referred to about 1978 by Dr. Pauline Clance, who worked with another doctor, Susan Elms was the other doctor. They came up with imposter syndrome, where what it is you not accepting the external confirmation of your abilities. So no matter how many people say to you, do you know what, you do a fantastic job, well done, really good job that, you deserve to be in here, in the back of your mind is you thinking, oh, I'm not comfortable doing this job. Yeah, I'm out of my depth. How many people have sat there and thinking, I'm out of my depth? Yeah. I got imposter syndrome every time I walked out on to speak to someone in crisis. Jesus Christ, am I the right person for this job? Yeah. You start to doubt. And that's because we are negatively influenced. It's called negative reinforcement. Yeah, or negative conditioning. They did a study I think it's in the States that they do it, where they ask people to look at and think consciously about every time throughout their life, up to, I think they do it about between 16 and 18 years old, the study, how many times they remember somebody sitting them down and saying, do you know what, you did a really good job. You're doing really well, you're absolutely fantastic. Compared to how many times they remember being criticised. And the figures are horrendous. Handful of times people are praised for doing something good. Hundreds and hundreds of times they can recall being negatively conditioned. I listened to a lady on the train a couple of weeks ago, and I was I was on the train into Manchester. There was a family sat next to me, and the teenage son was he was obviously trying to push a point that he'd been pushing for quite a while. getting a decision on whether he could go to a party or not. And his mum came out with this line, "Do you know what, son? You just need to learn to give up." That's negative conditioning. Reinforced by his dad, who said, "Yeah, just give up." But that's what happens all the time. So then when we get to positions where we have to rely on our own abilities, we've got that little negative mind, that little voice going in our heads. 70% of successful people have at some point come across imposter syndrome and feel that they weren't good enough to be where they were. Listen to those around you. You've got to where you are because you deserve to be there. This will stop you making decisions. Previous experience. Have you got experience with the decision that you've got to make? Yeah? Is it new to you? If it's new to you, it's more difficult. Yeah? If you've got previous experience, you can fall back on that. What are the consequences of the decision? What if it goes wrong? What if what you've decided to do doesn't work? From our perspective, that could be a hostage being released or a hostage being killed. Yeah? Someone taking their own life. It could be anything around that from the intelligence world. It could be somebody's life being put at risk. So the consequences stack up. No different for you. Yeah? All right, people might not die, but you might lose your job if you get it wrong. So those things play on your mind. Working out what the consequences are. How accountable are you for if this goes wrong? And trust is a huge thing. Do you trust the team that you work with? Because if you've got a lack of trust or poor trust in your team, it will prevent you from making decisions that involve them. Does that make sense? You've got to understand the people. The workshop we did last time around, using listening to understand people. Understand your team and trust your team. Yeah, you're all professional people. I say this a lot to police officers. Yeah, you get paid a lot of money to do the job. So trust your staff to do to make those decisions. Trust in the leadership. Those around you, your line managers, your senior bosses, the people that you're accountable to. Do you trust them that if you get it wrong, will they support you? What's the feeling? I won't get you to answer that question. Team dynamics. How does the team work? All these things impact massively on how we decision make. Failure anxiety, we've covered that one really. Option uncertainty, too many options. Yeah, I'm not quite sure where I stand, what my options are. Covered this before, not having enough information. Having too much information, just as bad. It's a bit like Goldilocks, isn't it? Getting it just the right amount. So what about emotions? What part do we think emotions play? It's interesting, I've been doing some work with Sport UK with the coaches for the elite athletes. And we're talking about the impact of emotions. And one of the guys who was discussing it with said, emotions don't come into it. Well, emotions do come into it. We're emotionally driven. For those of you that came last time when we showed you the emotional awareness scale, we are emotionally driven. Yeah? Our amygdala deals with it for us. It's our fight or flight response. Your emotions play a huge part in your decision making. Don't think that you can make them without them. It's not a cold decision. So this is decision inertia, and this is what happens. These are the things that we've just talked about that impact. And what decision inertia is your inability to make a decision. And what you do is you'll sit and flounder and think and ponder and think, well, I just need a little bit more information. Can you go and get me that bit of information? I just need to speak to such a body. You might not have that. You guys will be under time pressures the same as any other organisation. Yeah, if you've got deadlines to meet, you've got deadlines to meet. Yeah. All these things will impact on your ability to come to a decision and stick with it. And that ties in with commitment and consistency, because once we've made a decision, once we've committed to it, we will behave consistently with that decision. None of us like to be proved wrong. You have to understand yourself, because if your decision's wrong, you need to change it. Don't just stick with it. If you can see very quickly that actually this wasn't the right move, then let's reassess it. I'll show you a decision-making model, and the last part of it is reviewing it. Reviewing the decision. Is it right? If not, don't just stick with it. It's a subconscious influencer within us that once we've made a decision, we'll stick to it. You have to understand that and recognise when you're doing it so that you can step outside and reevaluate. So what part do emotions play? I'm going to show you a little plan here. So this is you on the end. You're 1 metre off the ground. The board is 10 metres long. It'll stand your weight, absolutely no problem whatsoever. On the end is a couple of grand. Okay. Any issues walking across it to pick it up? Who's walking across it? Everybody? Don't really need much of a risk assessment for that one, do we? Okay. What about now? Who's walking across it now? Still going? Still going? So there's quite a lot of you aren't going. So what's changed? Has the risk changed? Okay, interesting. So let's go back. So the risk of falling off there. Brilliant. It's the consequences that have changed. Your assessment and your ability to walk across that has not changed. What flew in was your emotion, fear. And it's the consequence. The consequence of failure is what is the difference. The actual task is exactly the same. It's a great demonstration of how fear just kicks in with us. Nothing has changed. They did the police use a system called Hydra Minerva, and it's a decision-making tool. It's a software package where you sit in rooms and you're fed information and you type up your decision-making. And they ran a scenario around the Jean-Charles Jimenez, who was shot, the guy who was shot going into the underground. And they fed information in. And the decision every time was take the shot. Take the shot. So then, rather than the exercise finished, they carry on. So the team go in and confirm that this person has not got any kind of weapon, any kind of device. He was no risk whatsoever, completely unarmed. They then feed them another piece of information, that they've got the target. They've picked up a second target and they're following. And they feed them exactly the same information. How many people do you think on the second time take the decision to take the shot? Very, very few. The risk is the same, the information is the same, the consequences of failure have changed. You've got to recognise the part that emotion plays in your decision making, yeah, and address it with yourself. Okay? If it was the right decision first time, right decision second time. On that point, I would neither walk across there at 200 feet either. Okay, so assessing risk. How do we assess the risk? 3 P's LEM is what we term it as. So what we're looking at is the type of harm that your decision is going to make. What is the impact of your decision? So is it a physical harm, psychological? Yeah? Is it to the public? Is it illegal? Or is it economic? Yeah? Or is it a moral issue? So what do we think about this, the donkey? Is the physical harm? Yeah. Psychological? Yeah, definitely to the donkey. What about risk to the public? Yeah. Are there legal implications? I'm not so sure about India, but certainly in the UK there would be, wouldn't there? Legal implications of overloading the donkey. What about an economic loss? Of course there is. All his stuff's damaged, isn't it? And is it morally right? So the decision with that one's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Yeah. So then what we look at, so every decision you're going to make, if you look at those 6 elements and see which part, and it's the same in your world, is it going to be an economic? Is it legal? It's certainly, I know from working previously with Lisa and a number of other companies that you're very heavily regulated, aren't you, in the world that you work in. So is there a legal implications? Work through that model. Yeah? It will help you assess what kind of risk you're taking, what kind of harm there is in the decision you're making. So once we've identified which one we're talking about, we're going to have to mitigate the risk. So how can we reduce it? How can we manage that risk? So someone at height, we will immediately try and make things safer. Yeah. So the first thing we look at, the acronym's CARTA. First thing we look at, are there already policies or contingencies in place within your organisation? Yeah. Is there a model already in place for this kind of incident, this kind of decision? And if there is, follow it. Yeah. It's there for a reason. Because if you step outside company policy, then you're leaving yourself exposed. And make no mistake about it, this risk assessment, yeah, and mitigating the risk is about back covering. Yeah, when you're making decisions that people's lives depend on, or in your case, your own jobs, your own organisation, the reputation of the company, yeah, then look at the decisions you're making, how they impact. Stick with your company policies if you've got them. So the other option, there's no contingencies in place. So we accept the risk. So we've got a guy, he's on the right side, usually on the wrong side of the railings. Huge risk of them slipping as opposed to actually jumping. So what can we do? Can we accept it? Can we reduce it? Yes, we can reduce the risk. So that's where I go first. Get them to step over the other side. Not going to step over the other side. Okay, just put one leg over the other side. Put one leg over there. Well, just hold on with your hand then. So that's what we're doing. We're looking at reducing that risk. Can we transfer the risk? A bit of a left shoulder on this. Can we give the risk to somebody else? How do you think most people transfer the risk? Say again, sorry? So you decide, or the other great one, the COPS is fantastic for this, and I'm sure it's no different with your organisation. You'll either send an email to your boss saying, this is what we're going to do. Any thoughts? They now own it. Yeah? Or even better, walk in and say, just need your advice on this. You've transferred the risk because that decision now is a joint decision. Unless they're very clever and say, can't discuss at the moment, make your decision, let me know. Or we can avoid the risk. An option is always to do nothing. Yeah? That is an option. It's not always the right option, but you always have the option to say, I'm not going to do anything. With this case, the option would be to avoid the risk completely, we're not going to engage with him. But from a policing perspective, that ties back to the legal. We're duty bound. So it ties in with that. So from our perspective, we can't just walk away. So, taking this, we've got pretty much everything on there with the strung up donkey. So I doubt there's any contingency plans. We're not going to accept the risk. How can we reduce the risk? Less stuff on the back. So we're going to talk now about consequence management, because every decision you make has a consequence. Okay? So when you're making your decision, you have to think wider. So when we look at, we've identified the risks, and we're going to reduce the risk. We're going to take half the load off so the donkey's not overloaded. What are the consequences of that from a risk point of view? He's going to come down, yeah. What else is there? Did somebody say it then? Absolutely. Why is there an economic loss? Yeah, so then you're making 2-3 journeys to get the same amount of product across. That's consequence management, thinking through the decision I've made, how is it going to impact? So when you come to your decision, work through that one. This is the model. Yeah? You start with the information or the task, and it is all based on the ethics of your company and the strategy of where your company wants to take itself. So all your decisions should be based around that it should be based on what the company believes in. If you step outside of that, then you're leaving yourself open. Okay? So first of all, what's the information? It could be anything. The decision to let somebody go, yeah, the decision to not complete that you're not going to complete a task on time, whatever it may be. Assess the risk using the 3 Ps LEM and then the CARTA. Yeah? Consider What is already in place? Is there a company policy for this? Are there contingencies in place for this? Work out your options, and when you're working out your options, look at the consequences of each option. Yeah, it comes back to that wicked decision. Work out your options for each, the consequences for each option you've got. When you've come up with the right one of the things that the police are really good at these days, and I can say that, is we record not just the decision we're making, but the decisions we're not making, if that makes sense. So these are my options. This is the one I've chosen. These are the ones I've not chosen, and these are the reasons why. And this is the reason that I've chosen this one. So have it in your head how you're working through. Yeah, what you're going to use, why you're going to use it, and I'm not saying that that you have to record it in that amount of detail, unless there's a chance that you might end up getting a public inquiry or going to prison afterwards for the decisions you've made. Yeah, in that case, it might be a good idea too. But in day-to-day stuff, just look at the model and work out what the decisions are, why you're not doing that, because at the end of the day, it was one of your options. So have a look at why you're not going to do it. Go with the one that you've decided. When you've decided on it and you've done the decision, as I said before, bloody review it. It's important not to just go blindly in, I've made that decision. Being a leader is as much about accepting that you don't get it right all the time. Yeah. So take the advice from the team. This is the trust in the team. You have to trust your team. Take the advice. If someone comes up, you should be working in an environment where you're comfortable enough to walk in and say, I'm not really sure about this. Have we considered this, this and this? And I will be wanting to listen to that person, because I certainly haven't got the monopoly on great ideas. Yeah, it's a collaborative effort. Yeah, so make sure you listen to your team. We cover consequence management. It's huge in the world that myself and Matt work in. Absolutely huge, because every decision we make, the decision to not do what the hostage takers said, because that would be one of the things that we're not going to do. What are the consequences? The consequences are person getting killed, yeah, person getting the boiling water poured over them, person getting a finger cut off, them actually dealing with what we've said and accepting it. All those things have to be considered and have to be written down as to why we're doing what we're doing. And it's no different with people in crisis. The decision to maybe switch tactic, and we refer to it as giving people a reality check, so they can be quite robust at times. So to switch from being all conciliatory and trying to get more information out of them, to switch to giving them a piece of your mind, is a tactic. But you have to work out how you're going to do it, what the risks are. The risks are, of course, from saying, not listening to you, and jumping. Yeah. It works in our world. If it works in those critical situations, it will work for yourselves. The trick is getting used to recognising the barriers, recognising when you're holding back, and understand yourself. Understand what it is if you've got imposter syndrome. Recognise what your strengths are and use them. And if you are unsure, ask someone in the team. There'll be somebody in there. You don't need to make the decisions on your own. If it is, go back to, make sure Lisa gives you a printout of you've got access to a printout of the decision-making model and the two acronyms, so that you can use them. Use them. They work in critical situations. They're going to work in your world.